Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news coming out of Russia and also Ukraine. But by far our biggest piece of news of the day is we are getting an update about the ceasefire situation between those two countries, and so far, Ukraine has agreed to that 30-day total ceasefire, but we've been waiting to hear back from the Russian side as to what they're going to say, and so far we are hearing from Russian officials that it is very unlikely for Putin to agree to that ceasefire, and it sounds like it's pretty much going nowhere, but we have all the news on that front today. And also, we do have some more big news that Ukraine is already launching major scale offensives along the Ukraine front lines pretty much right after US military aid was resumed to their country, and it sounds like, according to early reports, that could be going very well. And we also have an update about the sea ship collision right off the coast of England, and it sounds like that the cargo ship captain that rammed into, allegedly, the US oil tanker is a Russian national, and he's now been arrested in connection to that crash, and that is a very big twist to that story, and we have all that news to cover in the video. So let's jump into our first article of the day, which goes to open source intel. And we can see right here, in probably one of the biggest stories of the day, we have heard from Russian sources that they say that Putin is unlikely to agree to a US proposed 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, a senior Russian official told Reuters, and it's because, quote unquote, that Putin feels he has a strong position because Russia is advancing. So I had a feeling they were going to say this. I had a feeling that because they are taking ground in Kursk, that they're going to feel they have momentum and they're not going to want to stop that momentum, and so far, according to the statements by the senior Russian official being quoted by Reuters, it sounds like that is the current position of the Russian generals and also of Putin himself, and that is probably the reason they're going to reject the ceasefire according to these current reports. And I must admit, that's really not honestly that shocking because Russia's never been really too keen on a ceasefire, even though in the past it probably would have benefited them. For some reason, they've not been very keen on it, and what this is really once again basically exposing the fact that Russia does not want to stop the war under any circumstance, and they're pretty much proving that right here for everybody to see. So that is that piece of news. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to War Translated. And we have gotten a statement from Zelensky explaining why he agreed to the ceasefire in the first place and exactly what his strategy was when he went into these talks in Saudi Arabia with US officials. And today we've heard a quote from Zelensky. It says, quote unquote, "I have emphasized repeatedly that none of us trust the Russians, and we've been through this before, but we will not be playing along with narratives suggesting that we don't want to end the war, and I'm very serious about this, and it is crucial for me to end the war, and I want the US president to see this, for Europe and everyone to be united in forcing Russia to end the war, and that is why my reaction was that we are ready for a 30-day silence format in the way proposed by the American side." So Zelensky is explaining basically up front that he does not expect the Russians to agree to this, but he went into it basically to set the Russians up to look like the liars that they truly are. And right now, it sounds like Zelensky's plan might be going exactly according to plan, because the Russians are probably going to reject it, and that will prove Zelensky right, and it'll also prove that the US president was wrong about Russia truly wanting peace. So it sounds like it could be a very good plan if it goes the way Zelensky hopes it's going to go, which it looks very likely at this point. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to War Translated. And not only did we get a statement from Zelensky, but we also got a statement from Marco Rubio, who's the US Secretary of State, about how he feels this is going to go into the future. And he said, quote unquote, that if Russia says no to the ceasefire proposal, then we will need to analyze everything and determine our place in the world and what they intend to do, meaning Russia, and if they say no, it will reveal a lot about their goals and intentions. And he also added that the US believes that satellites could be used to monitor the ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. So already, it sounds like the US is already casting doubt on the fact that Russia might not even agree to this at all, and it does not sound very promising even from the US side, which is the side that was really pushing for this. It sounds like it's not very promising whatsoever. So Zelensky's basically saying it's not going to happen. Marco Rubio is saying it's not going to happen either, basically in his words right here. So it's not looking very good. But we also got a statement from the Russians themselves, and this post goes to War Translated once again, and this is a statement from Dmitry Peskov, who's the Kremlin spokesperson. And Peskov stated that it's best not to get ahead of ourselves when discussing Russia's response to the proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, and Peskov added that they first need to receive information from the USA, and that a conversation between Putin and Trump could be arranged swiftly, though no agreements have been reached as of yet. So as you can see, Peskov did not directly reject the ceasefire proposal, but he basically did put a dampener on it by saying that we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, basically indicating that Russia is going to put some crazy terms on top of it, or they're probably going to reject it outright. So this is not a very positive acceptance of this by the Russian officials, and once again, Peskov is basically a Putin spokesperson, and this guy's coming out and basically saying that we need to slow down here, we're not really too wild about it, and and let's think it over some more. So not sounding very positive on that front. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Samuel Romani. And just to give you some more context as to exactly where the Russians are coming from in these crazy world of negotiations that they want to engage in, it sounds like Russia will likely insist on the partial demilitarization of Ukraine in negotiations, and that means a cap on Ukraine's army, and it could be a very low cap like the 50,000 that was reported moot before the 2022 Istanbul talks. So if Russia expects to include this in future talks or negotiations, this is pretty much a non-starter because Ukraine will never agree to this, and especially if Ukraine does not have security guarantees, they're definitely not going to agree to cap their army because their own army would be the only way to defend their territory at that point, and that would basically give Russia the complete ability to come back a year or two after this ceasefire agreement was reached, or a permanent end to the war. It would allow Russia to come back a year or two later and simply steamroll the whole place with Ukraine's very, very small reduced army. So that is never going to happen, and Russia is really not playing by the rules here, of course, like usual, and they're negotiating in very, very bad faith. So just not good all the way around, and that's just more proof showing you the Russians are not very serious. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Null Reports. And moving away from our talk of a ceasefire, we've currently gotten word that there are massive offensives being launched by forces of the Ukrainian forces inside of the Ukraine front lines. And we can see right here that according to claims from Russian military bloggers, Ukrainian forces have launched offensives on several fronts, including Kupiansk, Savote, Toretsk, and Pokrovsk. And in addition, there are claims that Ukrainian Marines may soon attempt to seize several islands in the Dnipro River Delta. And it goes without saying this is a very positive thing because it already indicates that U.S. military aid has definitely been restarted to Ukraine, because for them to be launching brand new offensives, that means they must have some assurances that equipment is coming back. And according to reports we currently heard, it sounds like the Ukraine military equipment from the USA has been restarted in full and it is going to their territories. So this does indicate that is definitely the case, and we can see right here that Ukraine is already moving forward once again in several different regions. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Politico Europe. And also, let's switch gears one more time, because in this post right here, we have a hell of a piece of information about that current ship crash that occurred right off the coast of England about a day or two ago. A cargo vessel rammed into a U.S. oil tanker, which is operated apparently, or at least contracted by, the U.S. military, and is responsible for bringing oil products to the U.S. military in times of war. We've gotten a bombshell piece of news here about the captain of the cargo ship, and we can hear that in this post, the captain of the ship that crashed into the U.S. tanker is a Russian national, says the owner of the ship, according to Politico Europe. So that is a very big revelation, by the way, because of course, the country right now that we're currently at odds with is Russia, and it turns out that a Russian national contributed to the crash right into the vessel that was the U.S. oil tanker. So once again, it's all allegedly right now, but this is not sounding very good, and it sounds very suspicious. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Inside Geopolitics. And we're also hearing another disturbing piece of detail about the entire story. Apparently the captain once again was a Russian national, but he was also apparently arrested in connection to this crash, which occurred right off the coast of England, and the rest of the crew were mainly Russian, and there were some Filipino, according to the current reports. So that is not good at all either. I don't know why they arrested him. Apparently they have some pretty good evidence against this individual that he did something very wrong that led to this accident. I'm not really sure exactly what the exact details are about it. We don't have the charges in front of us, but this is very disturbing to hear and indicates there could be a lot more to this story than simply it being a crash. So we're waiting to hear more details on this, but I'm sure we will be hearing some very disturbing things coming out of this. We'll have to wait and see what this is, but not sounding good. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Null Reports. And back to our Ukraine news real quick, we have heard that Maxar has restored satellite imagery access to Ukraine, and this is a significant step following talks in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. has resumed intelligence sharing and military aid to Ukraine. So once again, Ukraine uses the satellite imagery to use for their targeting data, and they also use it to keep track of where the Russian forces are for their own intelligence gathering purposes. And it's very important that they have access to that, and it sounds like it's been restored in full, and Ukraine has all the satellite imagery they'll need to conduct the war into the future. So that is an extremely positive piece of news and very good to hear. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Null Reports once again. And this post right here provides a little bit more confirmation that the transport of U.S. weapons to Ukraine via the Poland hub has resumed, according to the Polish Deputy Defense Minister Zalewski. So very positive news once again that all the military aid, basically back to square one for Ukraine and U.S. relations, has been resumed back to Ukraine once again. So they're getting all the ammunition, all the artillery shells, and all the equipment they need to make sure their country is defended. And basically, like I said, we're back to square one. So Ukraine is being armed by America, and it is once again back to status quo, which is a very very good thing. But jumping to our next post here, this one goes to Max24. So we do have an update about the Kursk situation in relation to the Ukrainian forces, and today we got a statement from the Secretary of the Verkhovna Rada Committee that there is no complete withdrawal of the Ukrainian forces from the area of Sudza, which is in Kursk. So this is a very interesting statement right here, because we have heard rumors that the AFU are withdrawing from Sudza and also trying to withdraw from the Kursk area as a whole to regroup inside of Ukrainian territory, because once again, it was not a real military objective to take Kursk. It was simply a distraction method to get the Russians distracted off the Ukrainian front lines and basically spread them thin. So right now we're hearing from the Verkhovna Rada Committee that there is no complete withdrawal, but that's kind of interesting though, because in our next post here, which goes to Clash Report, we see something a little bit different. And according to Deep State, which tracks the war, we are seeing that on their map, it looks like the Ukrainian army is completely withdrawn from Sudza in the Kursk region. And right now we've got conflicting reports, because it looks like, according to what we're seeing, Deep State is reporting a complete withdrawal, but at the same time, we're hearing different statements from the committee of the Verkhovna Rada. So I'm not really sure what to believe here. I would tend to think, though, that the Ukrainians are probably withdrawing from the area. That's my assumption, but we'll have to wait and see when there's official statements made by either Zelensky or a top-ranking Ukrainian official to either confirm or deny this information. But right now, a very interesting situation going down in Kursk. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Rob Lee. So this is a really quick snippet of news right here, because I don't have a ton of details about it, but it is a pretty big story, so I'm going to report it here in the video. So it says, the commander of Ukraine's Operational Command North has been dismissed. And sadly, like I said, I don't have any details about this. I'm not sure why this is the case, but this is a pretty big dismissal right here, and I can only maybe assume that it's because of some sort of frontline failure of some sort. That would be my initial assumption. Maybe it's relating to Kursk in some way or another, but I really just don't know right now. But a pretty big firing, and we'll be watching that one really closely to see exactly what caused that and what the future situation is going to be for that area of the operational command. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to open source intel. And y'all know it wouldn't be a complete short war video without a piece of news coming out of Iran, because of course Iran's been acting very crazy over the last couple of weeks and actually over the last couple of months. And today we've gotten a statement from Iran's leader Khamenei, and he's dismissed the US's negotiation offer, calling it a deception of public opinion. And that's quite rich coming from him, because he's literally the king of deception when it comes to these things like this. And so far, it sounds like Iran has taken the hard path and not the easy path when it comes to dealing with US officials. And I don't think that's going to pay off for Iran. I think eventually Iran is going to pay a very high price for that, and also they're going to pay a high price for trying to develop nuclear weapons to basically go in and scare everybody in the Middle East, and that's not going to go well for Iran. So they're acting tough now, but I imagine the toughness will probably come to an end, and the crying will be starting probably very soon when the US gets finished with their country. But with that, folks, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. So if you enjoyed the video, please smack the like button and also subscribe to the channel as well for more up-to-date news just like this every single day. And also, be sure to go check out our Patreon page, by the way. The link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there and sign up for a monthly membership and support the channel that way, which is a very big help, by the way, and we appreciate all of our Patreon subscribers, because that is another way the channel keeps running, and we appreciate that very much. It does make the channel possible. And once again, be sure to join us all at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight for another night of War News streams to cover all the rest of the news throughout the day and a more in-depth discussion of what we discussed here in the video. So be sure to join us for that. And also, folks, we'll see you tonight on the stream. And with that, bye-bye for now.